Hi, and welcome to Women's Health Conversations. I'm Denise Louie, and with us today is Dr. Vonda Wright and our special guest, ultra athlete and author, Charlie Engle. But before I allow Vonda to introduce Charlie a little bit more deeply, I wanted you to know that this was a live recording, and you could tee up questions for us. And when they're done with the bulk of the interview, we'll tee up the questions that you have for us. So we look forward to that. And in that case, I will sign off for now, and I'll let you guys chat. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Well, hello, everybody, and I'm so thrilled to be back with the Women's Health Conversations speaker series. I have had so much fun, and tonight is going to be no exception because I have an amazing guest tonight, Charlie Engle, and I'm going to introduce him to you, and I'm going to be left breathless getting through some of this because you've had such a rich life, Charlie, that I can't wait for you to share with the people that are on us tonight. But I was so fortunate in February to get to meet Charlie for the first time at a conference in Florida called the Lake Nona Impact Forum, where a bunch of people concerned about well-being and healthcare got together, and Charlie was there to tell his story. And so formally, I know you're going to want this right now. So you can find him at charlieengle.com because I'm going to talk about a lot of his stuff and you'll find it all there. But Charlie is a global ultra endurance athlete, meaning, you know, I attracted a lot of you here by asking the question, could you run across the Sahara Desert? Well, one of the rich things about Charlie's life experience is that he takes on these amazing challenges that he's going to talk to us about tonight. And running across the Sahara was only one of them. He has an amazing story of grit and endurance and life survival that he's going to share. And we're going to hear about his next project, the 5.8 Global Adventure Series. So, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on with us tonight.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thrilled to be here. And I knew this isn't exactly how I expected we would do this when we met a couple months ago, but
Right.
I knew we'd find a way to have a good chat.
That's it. Well, I'm so glad to have you. And, you know, when I was telling people we were going to do this tonight, I sent it out to every runner I knew, thousands and thousands of people, because most of us can slog along a few miles. Maybe some of us do a marathon or a few, or, you know, the really ambitious people do 100-miler. But I read in your bio that some days as you were writing your book, Running Man, you would have rather run 100-miler casually than have to focus like that, which is an amazing thing to say out loud. But I wonder if you would share with our audience tonight some of the remarkable life experience you had that have you gotten you to the place, because I know this is something that is so formative and compels you on your as you go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love having the opportunity. I think that the question that you put out to people about running across the Sahara, the first question each of them probably asked is, why in the world would someone do that?
Yeah.
And I would put it out to everyone that in fact it's the question that I'm still trying to answer. You know, the why is the ultimate lifelong question for me. I think for all of us really, but for me, I've chosen to take on physical challenges in an effort to understand more about myself and what makes me tick, and what still motivates me today at 57. Mm-hmm. And when I look back at my 20s, and I think people will get a good glimpse of where I came from, I was a 17-year-old freshman when I went to UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I arrived there at school with pretty good credentials and student body president and good grades. And I played all the sports and dated a couple of cheerleaders. And I was all that. And yeah, that was my, I was big man on campus when I get to school at Chapel Hill. And guess what? There's 4,000 other freshmen there who have the same resume, who accomplished just as much or more. And, and I sort of realized pretty quickly that as special as I might have felt in high school, I certainly wasn't special there. And I pretty quickly fell into a pattern of drinking a lot. The drinking age was 18 years old in Chapel Hill when I got there, and I took full advantage of that. And I not to make light of it, but I figured out that I was a phenomenal, like, first team, outstanding All-American drinker. I could just drink more than pretty much anybody else. Not the thing you want to aspire to, just as a hint. But it took me, it was also the 80s were the cocaine decade, as I like to call it. And so let's just put it this way, because I don't even like to dwell on this part of my story. From the time I was 17 until I was 29 years old, I spent those 12 years basically chasing that first high and trying to replicate the circumstances and the feelings and the power and all that energy that came from that first experience. And I always like to say that I think we all kind of do that throughout our lives. Like, we have these super powerful first experiences, and then we try to figure out how to make that happen again. And with drugs and alcohol, it's actually pretty difficult. The only way to do it is to do more and more. Mm-hmm. So flash forward 12 years, I had tried everything to quit. And at 29 years old, my first son, Brett, was born. And I knew that he was going to change everything for me. Like, he was actually going to save me, in fact. And just by his mere presence, I'd gone to rehab and meetings and church and you name it, I'd tried to do it. Fitness programs, diets, shamans, meditation, anything I could think of, I had tried. And I just knew that this was going to be the answer. And for a couple of months, it really made a difference, because I remember standing there holding this little baby and staring at this child, and for the first time, in my life, really feeling love for another person, and feeling it from him also, that I actually didn't think I was capable of, because as an addict, I just assumed I was broken and probably undeserving of that kind of love. And so, for the first time, I really felt like I had some hope for the future. And a couple months into his life, I can't explain what happened. Nothing happened, but I found myself driving to the worst neighborhood in the city. And I spent the next 6 days doing drugs and drinking, and that 6-day binge ended with me sitting on the ground outside a dumpy motel room watching the police go through my car, and there's bullet holes in the car, and it was a bad situation. And I'll never forget this cop actually reaching under the seat and searching my car and finding this little glass pipe. Mm-hmm. And turning around and giving me a look of condemnation that I can still see it like it's happening right now. And that shame that I felt in that moment. And, any sane person would have thought, oh my God, I'm in a lot of trouble here. I'm going to go to jail. This is going to happen. And all I could think was, so that's where that was. I wonder if there's anything left in there. Like, it was this sick addict thinking that I couldn't shake. And after 6 days of not sleeping and being on this bench, I had the clearest thought I have ever had. Like, nobody is coming to save you. Your son can't save you. None of these other people can save you. Job, wife, none of that can save you unless I'm ready to make the change for myself. And it was on that day that I finally went to a meeting that night, a recovery meeting, for the first time that I ever really meant it. Like, instead of looking for somebody to do something for me, I was going to do it for myself. And then the next morning I got up and I put on my running shoes and I ran a couple of super painful miles. And, but I made a commitment on that day to do those two things every single day. And for 3 straight years, without missing a day, I went to a meeting and I went for a run every single day. And I slowly began to build a life for myself.
How did you, with the clarity of mind, just that very clear day, and then I know why you chose the meetings. how did you choose the physical activity to go with it? What was that the, instead of the physical acts that you were doing before, was that it? Was that how you chose it versus, you know, I baked sour bread in COVID. I mean, I wish I would have run more. I baked sourdough. And not to make light, but how did you make a pivotal decision like that?
Yeah, you know what? That's such an astute question, and I really appreciate that, because it is, you know, sort of my standard answer, and I'm going to go a little deeper here. You know, would just be that I had been a runner in high school, a successful one, and I even ran through college and through my 20s. Like, I was a binger. I would just like kill myself with drugs and alcohol for 3 months, and then I would determine that I wasn't going to ever do that again, and the first thing I would turn to would be running. I'd start running, and I would feel better because it was my way to purge. But when I say dig a little bit deeper, to be honest with you, there's an aspect of punishment that goes, anybody who's ever run and hates it would agree that there's an aspect of physical punishment that goes, yeah. And you know, a lot of people do, and we'll talk about that later. We'll get to you in a while.
Yes, please do. I mean,
but you know, there's this idea of, well, you know, so I felt when I went out every single day, I ran as hard as I possibly could, because there was an aspect of wanting to like purge and to get rid of, like, pound the addict out of me. And I had people ask me, I mean, look, in those 3 years, I ran over 30 marathons, you know, so like clearly I had that whole addiction thing under control, right? And, you know, and people would ask, oh, well, you know, it looks like you just switched addictions. You know, you're still an addict, you know, now you just run. And I knew they were digging at me. And it took me a while to realize that, you know, addiction is all about hiding. Addiction is about feeling nothing, about being invisible. That's the purpose of drugs and alcohol, is to tamp down any feelings. If I ever had a feeling, I just drank or drugged it away. And that's a longer story in my history as to why. But I'm a fourth generation addict, so a lot of the why is just buried in genetics. And you know, I realized that running was the exact opposite of addiction. Everything about running, because with running, there's no hiding. You can't run a marathon and hide. Like, anybody who's ever run a marathon knows when you hit 14 miles or 18 miles or 22 miles, whatever that is, and you feel horrendous and everything about your body is screaming, stop.
Yep.
You know, there's no hiding in that. You're fully present, and you have to find a way to get past that moment and keep going. And that's why I still do it today, is because I want to get to that point where I absolutely can't go any farther, and then try to figure out a way to keep going.
So it's very mental, and I want to continue on that. But what I heard you say, Charlie, and I don't even know if you meant it, but there is a long history based on books and movies and even spirituality. People have always used physical means of penitence, right? Whether it's confession and then you have to do something, or whether it's, I'm not saying running is flogging, but it's almost spiritual, what you just saying. And I don't know if you intend it to be, but penitence and punishment, and you just used running, right? Because you said it hurts. And I got to tell you, people, I run, but I don't love it until I'm done. So, I mean, I totally get that. But I thought that was very, really deep, Charlie, that you said that. When I ask you why running, right? Because, yeah.
Well, and I here's the other thing, I ran so hard in those 3 years, in a sense, to try to pound the addict out of me. Like, if I could have done what you do for a living and taken a scalpel, although I think you use lasers more than that, but if I could have used a laser to like remove the addict part of me, just like wherever that lives, and cut it out, like, I would have done that. because I thought that guy was trying to kill me. And it took me those 3 years of running to understand that my addict is all the best parts of me. Like, if I wasn't an addict, if I didn't have this obsessive nature, I probably wouldn't be good at anything. And what it, but as my mom used to tell me, I need to use my powers for good.
Your superpower.
And if I can point those powers in the right direction and use them for my benefit, then everything is, much better.
Yeah. Well, that's really, so you ran every day for 3 years. You came to a place where you understood. And then how did you start with the other, just sheer mileage you were doing, to the project running and to the challenge running? And if we move to how you got through all those marathons to the Sahara. I don't want to skip too many years of this experience, but I'm wondering, when did it become these project runs? Because you don't just go out and do something. It's purposeful. It's a project. So that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, and I think that at its core, what I figured out for me was that all the most meaningful lessons in my life, and I would argue anybody listening to this would agree, if you took a second and you just thought about the most purposeful, meaningful thing that's ever happened to you, that's helped create the person that you are, it was probably something that involves struggle. Very few people find formative experiences in things that come easy. And so for me, addiction and 12 years of killing myself and the lessons I learned, along with the lessons I was learning in running, taught me that when I take on challenges, and the most controllable challenge was a physical one, because I knew, I could guarantee suffering. If I ran a marathon or I was like, okay, marathon does this, I'm going to run 50 miles. Then I'm going to run 100 miles. Then I'm going to run hundreds of miles, and then even thousands of miles. So I started to do this all over the world, and I was winning races all around the world. I won races in the Gobi Desert and in the Amazon jungle. Wow. And in Chile, down in the Atacama Desert, and in the jungles of Vietnam. And I was doing some of the most difficult events in the world, and not always winning, but doing well. And the lessons that I was able to take from those experiences, not to mention the cultural experiences I had, because I recognized very early on that putting myself into other cultures and immersing myself and trying to understand more about those cultures and the people who live differently than me was really important for my, personal growth, and way more important than focusing all my attention on making money or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I ended up getting what's crazy is I got a great job as a senior producer for a television show on ABC called Extreme Makeover Home Edition.
Oh, I've known that show.
Most people watched it. It was the #1 show on TV for a few years, and I had a blast. I learned a lot there. I learned how to make films. I learned I just learned a lot of lessons in that. And how all of this led to the Sahara Desert, which was, the premise of how you suckered a few people into coming on and listening to this, is I really just started, I was doing a race in the Amazon jungle, and a guy that I met there blurted out this crazy idea. He's like, hey, I wonder if anybody's ever run across the Sahara Desert. And I always like to say, words said to us by a stranger in passing can sometimes change the course of our lives. Mm-hmm. You don't know where that's going to come. In truth, in the moment, I looked at him and I said, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. You'd have to be an idiot to even think about that.
But you couldn't get rid of it.
I couldn't. Of course, being the idiot that I am, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, and so I went home after the race, started to do research, found out no one, in fact, had ever run across the Sahara. And, first in the adventure world are really hard to come by. And so I began to just tell people, I took possession of this idea. I just started telling people I was going to be the first person to run across the Sahara Desert. And I had the advantage because of my job of knowing some folks in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a meeting with this director who had won the Academy Award for the Best Documentary a couple of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
His name was James Mall. And James, basically the worst pitch I've ever given, but at the end of our meeting, after 15 minutes, he stood up and shook my hand and said, I'll do it. I would like to make this movie. And I was stunned. And a week later, he called and he called and he's like, he called me a week later and he's like, hey, I just hung up with Matt Damon and Matt would like to executive produce this project and he wants to be the narrator of the film. Would that be okay with you? And I, of course, took a deadpan beat and pretended to think about it. And I said, I was really hoping for somebody better, but Matt Damon would be just fine. And so now I have these 2 Academy Award winners attached to a film project about me running across 5,000 miles of sand. And,
You're kind of committed. I mean, you got,
what?
I said you were then kind of committed. What else are you going to do?
Yeah, well, you know what? How many people have started businesses or said to themselves, hey, let's get pregnant or whatever it might be, and you're like, it's this idea, and you're sort of taking possession of it, and then all of a sudden it's like it's like, holy cow, now what do I do?
That's it.
It's like, so you flash forward a year later after all these people said yes, and this is like starting a business, right? Because that's really what I was doing. I started a business running the Sahara, and I got 2 teammates that were going to do it with me. I got film crews on board. I started a nonprofit with Matt Damon called H2O Africa.
Yeah.
So a year later, I'm sitting there on the coast of Senegal, surrounded by 20 people and cameras and everything else. And everybody's like super excited and we're starting the next day. And it's just all this energy. And in my head, I'm like going, oh my God, I have conned all of these people into coming to the Sahara and we're all going to die. Like we're never gonna make it out of here.
Oh my God.
And I'll tell you that's where it got interesting. Then a week from that day when we started, it had been for the first week 140-degree ground temperatures every day. It was we ran out of food, we ran out of water. 2 of my crew members quit. Both of my teammates were on IVs and like severely dehydrated and sick. Like a week into this expedition with a lot of money committed and people and this nonprofit, like it looked like it was going to be the shortest big expedition in history. We had 5,000 miles to go. We had covered like 200 miles. It was awful. And I realized, and I think this is an important point, especially for all that we're sort of going through in the world today.
Yeah.
I realized that I was so focused on putting my feet in the Red Sea 5,000 miles away that I forgot the lesson that I learned, the most important lesson I learned in sobriety. And we all know the saying, and that's this one day at a time idea. And I was so focused on getting to the end that I forgot that the only miles that I could run were the ones that were right in front of me. Like I couldn't worry about the next country or the next week. I needed to just focus on what was right in front of me. And if I could find a way to get to the end of that day, then I could worry about the next day then. And so on day 8, all I thought about was running a marathon in the morning.
In the morning, yes.
Before lunch. And I focused all my attention there. And I got to lunch, I took a little break, a nap, and I ate some food. And then all I focused on was running a second marathon before dinner. And at the end of the day, I put my little thin foam mat on the sand, and I looked up at, a million stars, a billion stars, and I gave thanks for the opportunity to be alive and to be out there suffering. And I use that lesson every single day now because I make a gratitude list every single day right now because things are hard. They're kind of hard all around. And I recognize that if I do focus at least a little bit of my attention every day on what I'm grateful for, then it makes my day better. And so slowly but surely, we made our way across the Sahara Desert. We ran basically 50 miles a day, 2 marathons a day for 111 consecutive days. And we crossed Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Libya, and Egypt. And it was, it's basically like running 5,000 miles on the beach. It was hard running.
Right.
Because it was pretty much all sand, and it was hot, and then it was cold in Libya, and we had to just focus on this whole one day at a time idea and make our way across the world's biggest desert.
And even more than, did it get so granular for you? Because as you describe it, I'm really visualizing, and sometimes, and listen, I've only run 3 marathons, but sometimes I get past 20 miles and people are going, "You're almost there." And I'm saying to them, "I actually have 6 more miles." And it gets to where I'm just watching my foot in front of the other. Granularly, is that what you're saying? Like maybe in the evening, you're hitting the 24th out of the last 26 miles, and it just became so in the moment focused. I've got 2,000 more steps on this foot. I've got 2,000 more steps on this foot, because it's 1,000 steps. People are listening, it's 1,000 steps per mile per foot. So is that how granular it got? Because I think there's a lot of lessons in that for tough times, right? To be that granular in the moment. Is that what it was?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. And really it was always breaking things down into small increments. Because even, we know what we do, the mental games we play. And by the way, 3 marathons is a lot of marathons, because I always say anybody who runs more than one is, you're no longer naive and ignorant. You're foolish enough to do it again. So
that's right. We know.
You knew what you were getting into, right? So,
yeah.
And it was this idea for me, and I learned it through the years. There was I call it meditation. I mean, people ask me all the time if I meditate, and I say yes. And I do some formal meditation where I'm actually seated, and I'm listening to either guided meditation or just doing breathing exercises. But most of my meditation is actually while running.
Yes.
Because if you can focus your mind and just be present and feel and listen to your breathing, and try not to let your mind, your mind's going to go where it goes. We all know that. It's hard to keep it corralled in focused on one thing.
Right.
But to try to always bring it back to the breathing, I use long running as a way to calm my mind and to meditate. And I think you said something funny, and this is where I'm gonna very very tongue-in-cheek hold you accountable, because people say to me all the time, they're like, "Look, I really like to run. I like to be a runner. Can you help me? But by the way, I hate running." And I always say to them, okay, well, first of all, even if you're just kidding yourself, you've got to find a way to ditch that deeply seated thought that you sort of start with every day. This I hate running. What you hate is the way running makes you feel in the moment. I always make the joke. I'm like, oh, so you hate fresh air, and you hate being healthy, and you hate hearing the birds, and you hate all of that. And they're like, no, I don't hate that. I'm like, okay, well, then you don't hate running. What you hate is how running makes you feel while you're doing it, because it's uncomfortable. And in general, what happens is most people starting running programs, they run too fast, first of all. So they need to actually just, calm it down, keep it a little bit slower, and try to keep it at a place where it's not so uncomfortable, so that you're not going to dread it every time you go out.
Yeah.
But then also, they normally, you're a veteran of running, but most people will quit too soon. It doesn't get easier in the first week or the first 2 weeks, and therefore they're like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. And like any other commitment, you've got to say to yourself in the beginning, okay, I'm going to give this 90 days. I'm going to videotape myself once a week on Monday and keep a record of how I'm actually feeling. And people are shocked when they go back and look, and they're like, holy cow, 6 weeks into this, even though it still wasn't easy and I may not have enjoyed it, it was so much easier than when I started.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I mean, and you're right. I gotta ditch I hate the running, because what I love, I don't know if you have ever been around a farm. I was raised on a farm.
Yeah.
And I had horses. Horses are barn broke, right? You go out with your horse and the thing won't even run. But you turn around towards the barn and this thing is secretariat. So for me, right. So for me, running, I'm kind of like that, like my barn broke horse. If I can just pivot my mentality that I love the second half instead of dreading the first half, I would be so much better off. Because I don't know if I told you or if I did, I actually did commit to 2 marathons this year, if they actually happened. So we're late enough in the fall. Hopefully they will happen. But so, you know what, for the people listening, if you want to see the story of the Sahara, it's called Running the Sahara, and you can find it out there. And then captured in your book, Running Man, which you got to go to this man's website. It's all there. It's very interesting. But I wonder, because I want to stay true to the commitment not to keep you here all night, although I would be happy to hang out and maybe drink some wine and hang out all night. But what is going on in the future for you? I want to hear about your new project, and then we want to get to some questions. So I know COVID has kind of slowed us all down, and we can't train or, plan big things because we don't know what's happening. But tell us about the 5.8 Global Adventure Series.
Yeah, so I'm actually stacking up ideas in my head. I want to say one thing first for your marathons, and this is where, again, I will say to you and anybody else who's planned a marathon in the fall or two, you're going to do them no matter what. Like I've been telling people, because I guarantee you those races you signed up for, they're going to do virtual marathons if they can't do one in person.
Right.
And so, I tell people, look, train like you're doing the marathon. Don't even think about the if or, oh my God, I don't know if it's going to happen. Like keep your mind focused, just do the work and run it yourself. I mean, in fact, yes, you lose the energy of the crowd, but man, there's something really powerful about, setting your own course and doing your own, 5-mile loops or whatever it takes to even, be able to support yourself and just run your marathon. So the other thing I wanted to say before I got completely away from the Sahara is, just because a lot of people might have interest in this, is, when I decided to do that run, we started this nonprofit H2O Africa, which today is called water.org. And water.org is the world's largest clean water nonprofit. And we surpassed 1.3 billion in funding last year.
Wow.
And it is far and away. And the point that I make of that is I'm no philanthropist. I don't have much money. That's not ever been my focus. I like to go do these things, but you can do crazy ideas, things that seem outlandish and whatever, and you don't know what's going to come from it. So the energy of this wacky idea of running across the Sahara, created the platform to go out there and make a nonprofit that today serves millions and millions of people, not just clean water, but sanitation, toilets, girls get to go to school all over the world, because in so many other countries, if you don't have a toilet, the girls can't go to school. So it's not just about having clean water to drink, it's actually having sanitation. So anyway, I would be remiss in not mentioning that. That does lead me to the next thing, which is 5.8. My 5.8 Global Adventure Series really takes everything that I've learned up to this point. And it is my view, especially, no other time like right now with this coronavirus, that we are all on this never-ending cycle of low places and high points. We're on a roller coaster together, and the lows actually don't seem to pass quickly enough, and the highs always pass way too fast. And we spend most of our time kind of in the middle. But I decided to actually put a physical slant on that metaphor of lowest to highest, and literally try to go from the lowest place on the planet, which is the Dead Sea, to the top of Mount Everest. And to do that, I haven't done this one yet, but to do that, I have to go from the Dead Sea. I'm going to swim across the Dead Sea. I'm going to run 2,000 miles across the Arabian desert. And when I get to the tip of Oman, I will get in a kayak and paddle 1,000 miles across the Indian Ocean. And when I reach Mumbai, India, I'll mountain bike to the base of Mount Everest.
Mhm.
And from there, it's only a couple of miles. They happen to be straight up. So,
Well, there is the Everest thing, yes.
right. And it is this literal idea. Like I'm gonna dip a flask into the Dead Sea, and I'm gonna carry that water from there all the way to the top of Mount Everest to basically symbolically join the ends of the earth. And I think it is, I think it's an example. I think it's what we all go through in our lives, and now more than ever. I mean, you heard me say it before, and one of my favorite saying that I use all the time is just, what happens to us isn't nearly as important as what we do about it.
Mm.
This is a situation right now in particular, as many things are in our lives that, are out of our control, the what of it, but the response to it is completely within our control. And so, I remind people to not let the circumstances dictate the response, and to be malleable and to be adaptive, of course, but to also recognize that if you don't have that drive to go forward, then nothing's really going to happen. So to finish that thought, though, with 5.8, and I call it 5.8 because it's actually it's about 4,500 miles from the Dead Sea to Mount Everest,
Mhm.
but it's actually only 5.8 vertical miles from the lowest place on the planet to the highest point on the planet. And so that's why I call it 5.8, because we're this tiny little sliver of space that surrounds the planet.
Yeah.
We all live within that. We actually live in an even smaller portion of it. But like we literally, every human on the planet occupies this tiny little sliver of atmosphere that surrounds the world. And, I don't want to get into politics, but, you can be nationalistic, you can be whatever, but we are all in this together. It is a global community, whether you like it or not, and it's going to continue to be that way. We share this place, and we better take good care of it.
Charlie, that perspective, I mean, I don't get shocked very often, but what you just said, because the perspective of look how close we are longitudinally far. It's a very long rectangle, but a very short rectangle. This little sliver of space that we all live in. I mean, I'm like having this epiphany, like, oh my God, he's right. We all live like this together. It's not so far apart. It's right here. That's remarkable. I don't know. You just
think about it. Well, think about it the next time you go out for a run and you look down at your watch and you see 5.8 miles and you just think to yourself, I just literally ran the distance from the Dead Sea to the top of Mount Everest. And I covered the space that every human being on the planet lives. And, we just have to learn to be more loving and more charitable. And it doesn't mean that we give up our own rights. And every human being by nature is self-centered. That's part of being alive on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing that I tell people like right now is, who are afraid, especially if you're really afraid right now, the best way you can get out of that, in my view, is service. Just like what you're doing right now, you can be of service to others. And if you can find a way to do that, you will get yourself out of that fear-based place. And I love to tell this little story. It's very short. When I first got sober, 27 and a half years ago, my very first sponsor was an old guy. I'm getting to be an old guy, but he was like 75. And John was going to be he was my guru. Like, he's going to teach me how to be sober. I said, okay, John, what do I do? He's like, there's a meeting tomorrow night. I want you to show up 15 minutes early. You meet me there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I'm going to get there. And he's going to tell me the secret, to sobriety. I'm like, okay, John, I'm here. What do I do? He's like, go over there and make coffee. And I'm like, okay, and then what? He's like, no, that's it. Just go do that. And like, so for the next couple of months, I showed up every day to that meeting, and I showed up 15 minutes early, and I made coffee. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't get it, of course, at first. Like, how is that teaching me anything about being sober? But the point was 50 other people showed up at that meeting every single day. And most of them wanted to have a cup of coffee. And that was part of the routine. And that little tiny thing of doing something for others, not for my selfish, self-centered self, really made all the difference. And it put me on a path to understanding that, there's a lot more to this than just thinking about what's good for me. I haven't gone out there and run all over the world and whatever just so I can set records or some nonsense. When I wrote my book, Running Man, I told the publisher, Simon & Schuster, one of the biggest publishers in the world. And I said, look, I'm not interested in writing a book about running. I don't want to tell stories about I ran and it was hard and I pushed through it and I got to the end and I learned this lesson and then I went and did it again. I'm like, I want to write a real book. I want to write a book about my experiences in life and what's gotten me to this point, and to share my struggle with enough other people that maybe someone else will find their way into sobriety or into running and maybe make a new life for themselves the way I was able to.
Because I think what you're saying is, because that's obviously the real meaning of it all, not at all belittling the hundreds, maybe 100,000 miles or however long it is, but the real meaning is this thing you're telling us, and the epiphany you just gave me about how close we all are and how gratitude can make all these experiences so granular. Thank God I can put this foot in front of this foot. I mean, there's so many lessons to be taken away from your experiences, and I'm thankful that, I'm just thankful to talk to you again tonight. It's so great. But
no, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, it's been great. And we all are like, you and I talked about, and we won't get into all that, but I mean, plans, we both were talking about plans we both had when we met and all of that and all the things. It's not that those things won't still happen, but not everything gets to happen exactly on our time schedule.
No. And you know what, sometimes, when I met you, I was in a place where, I'm about to tell a little silver lining of this COVID business we're going through. When I met you, I was in my usual busy place in life where I can't remember the last 10 years of my life, because, when you were talking about granular, what's in front, the one foot in front of the other, I've just got to get through this 2,000 steps, right? Well, I was in a place in my life where, I'm a very high functioning person. I'm used to handling, but I don't remember 10 years of my life because I rarely stop to be that granular. But you know what this has forced me to do? I needed a sabbatical. There was no way I was ever getting one. COVID has made me do that. I couldn't practice for a month, right? So it has enabled me to slow down to the point of being granular and thinking through things. And Charlie, I'm doing a puzzle right now, and I'm doing these things that, it's not right. It doesn't that sound silly, but to have the time to think and to have an epiphany of, oh my God, Charlie just says we live in this slice of the earth. And I'm so thankful for that in this point. And I think that's what comes out of this weird time. I don't get to do the plans right now you and I talked about. I'll get to them. I'm that kind of person, but I want to remember the next 10 years of my life. And that's what this is. We will get to those plans you and I talked about. I'm going to hold conferences, and hopefully you'll come, and we'll hire you to speak, and we're going to share your wisdom with everybody. But right now, I'm very granular. I'm so thankful for this weird time.
And it's okay. I'm trying to wrap my mind still around the fact that it's okay to have an unproductive day. Like it's not, I don't have to feel bad about it. If I want to watch, we're going to watch the documentary tonight and like, whatever. it's I didn't accomplish, I've still got my list, but I'm not stressing out about it, and I make sure I get some miles in so that I can keep my busy brain quieted down.
Right.
But I was going to ask you, the puzzle that you're doing though, it's not like a puzzle of like a knee arthroscopy or anything like that, you know?
No, it's Starry Night. It's Van Gogh's picture of the Saharan, right? The sky.
That's a hard one. That's a hard one.
It's
yeah.
hard. It's all the same. So I'm
Yeah.
going to bring Denise in real quick so that we can take a few questions and wrap up, because I want to be conscious of your generosity and time. But
Yes, babe. Thanks for having me back. So yeah, we had a question come in, and hopefully Mary Brahenny, I hope I don't butcher your name there, Mary, but Mary wanted to know, will all exercise help with your addiction and staying clean? Has that kind of been your experience?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that question, I don't know if that question is just for me, but I'm going to answer it as like for myself, whether it could be anything and not just running. And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, I've recognized, you know, I've had, Vonda's not done my work, but I've had both my knees worked on, just minor stuff, but the day may come where I can't run anymore. I mean, I run a lot. And if that day comes, I mean, all it means is I'm going to spend more time on the bike or in the pool or in a kayak or, you know, something like that. And because I think, and I don't think anyone would argue with this, even if you don't love exercise per se, but your brain works better. Obviously, your body works better. You're healthier. Again, this time that we're living through right now, I think it's more important than ever to make sure that you're also getting. I preach all the time, sleep and hydration, because like I'm a very regimented person on sleep and hydration. I get 9 hours of sleep every night, and I stay hydrated, because all the hard work I do physically doesn't have a chance to actually like do the benefits that I want it to do in my body if I don't let myself recover.
Right.
The younger me, years back, just basically beat myself into oblivion every day because I didn't understand what overtraining was.
Right.
Now, again, I would say if the question is more from Mary about for her, like, can you accomplish those same things not running but doing something else? The answer, of course, is absolutely yes. And I encourage people not to approach exercise like the dreaded New Year's resolution, because it just doesn't pan out. You know, it's a change of lifestyle is what it is. And again, most of us, if you've gone a period of time without exercise being a real part of your life, we remember what it might have felt like when we were younger, whatever that means. And we're not going to feel that way. Certainly not right away, because the body has gotten older. And so it's just so important to cut yourself some freaking slack and not feel like you got to be perfect and whatever. Just the commitment I tell people is make a commitment to time. The rest will take care of itself. Like, even if what you do is go out for a 30 or 45-minute walk every day, and then you slowly start to maybe shuffle in, you know, a minute or 2 minutes of light jogging, and then walk some more, and like just doing that, but committing to it every day to a certain amount of time and getting out there and getting it done, no matter what it looks like. You know, the benefits are exponential over not doing anything. That's for sure.
Nope, I agree with that.
Okay, so we've got some rapid fire questions for you here.
Oh
Okay,
boy.
Given that you're the ultra endurance athlete, do you run every day?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
It's not that I don't ever take a day off, but I do actually run pretty much every day. And anybody who's around me is grateful for it, because it takes the run to actually focus some of these things into a coherent line. But yeah, I do. I do something every day. And I do want to say I do hot yoga a few days a week. I do, I cycle. I do a lot of ultra endurance cycling, like across the United States, and some other wacky stuff. And I recognize that I can't just do one thing, but if I can only do one thing, I do run every day.
Okay. What's the most beneficial other exercise, you know, kind of adding on to the question or to this statement you just made, that like what has benefited your running the most in terms of an alternative form of exercise?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give two answers again because I can never give just one. Hot yoga. And I prefer the hot yoga because I am a very I'm a tight, really not flexible dude. And so I like the heat to kind of help me warm up. And I don't know, I do better in there. I'm a terrible practitioner, but the beautiful thing about yoga is, it's all relative to you and your body. So as long as you go in and make the effort. The other thing I really encourage people to do, though, is hike, is literally hike. Because nobody doesn't like getting out in nature. You put on a small backpack, you take your water, you listen to the birds, you enjoy the sky, you climb a small hill, or, you hike to your local mountain. And there's nothing better for the soul and the body than just getting out for a hike. And that's at your own pace. And you don't have to be good at it. You just have to go out and do it.
Nice.
Oh, I love that answer. So the people who know your story, who come up to you, they've read your book, they've watched the documentary. What is the thing about your life story that seems to resonate with them the most?
Humor, of course, comes to my mind first, but I'll give the serious answer, which is when someone's seen the film, if they've also read the book, they have a little more perspective on, for example, running the Sahara. But they will, I will get the question quite often, how is it physically possible to run 2 marathons every single day for over 100 days? And this got asked to me years ago from a dude in the crowd, and I had never been asked before, and I actually just on the spot said, it's not physically possible. It's only mentally possible.
Mm.
There is no way to do it physically. The only way to do it is the mind controls everything. If the mind says to do it, your body will follow, and the reverse is not true. The body can't will the mind into action. The mind has to will the body. And I think that is always something important to remember, I always say to welcome the suffering, to find a way to remind yourself that all the best things come from the hardest things that you do. And there's very little gain from comfort or anything that comes easy for us.
Yep. I
Wow.
believe that.
What gives you a sense of awe? No pun intended.
So, you know what? And so, what I tried to do right there was actually picture, let the first picture come to my mind. And because I just saw it yesterday, was an Ansel Adams photograph of Death Valley. And I love deserts. I do think that there is incredible beauty in the starkness of a desert.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much color and depth that, people assume if they've never really been to one, they don't understand that that's there. And so the awe that I feel, I also love any situation. I love oceans and I love deserts, and it's because I feel infinitesimally small in those places. And I like not feeling important. I like, not getting caught up in my own self-importance and being reminded that, I'm just the tiniest grain of sand on this planet, and it's my job just to be here and witness it, and to hopefully be a caretaker for it. And that's my job.
You're spewing all sorts of spiritual wisdom here. I don't know if you realize that you're doing that, but I love it. Okay, so I guess final question here for you. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, man. Yeah, well, if it's my 25-year-old younger self in the midst of, a drug haze, it would have just been to stay alive. Because I really thought that my life was hopeless for a very long time. And thankfully I stayed alive to prove that wrong. I think the greatest advice I would remind myself early on is I did spend those same years chasing money, and I was too much. I didn't have a gauge. Like when I grew up, I didn't have a mentor or someone who really. My mom was a good example in a lot of ways, but she just never cared about money, so it wasn't a thing. And the only way that I thought I could prove success was through money, and it took me way too many years to realize how unimportant that was. Not that we all don't need it, and life can be easier with it, but it's no replacement for the wisdom and the groundedness and the lessons that come from hardship. And so I would tell myself, don't sweat the money stuff.
Wow.
That's great. Charlie, I am so glad you've joined us tonight, and I really, truly look forward to the next time I can spend time with you in person, and we can do fun projects together in the future. I sure hope we figure out a way, and I'm thankful for all your time tonight. And if anyone wants to read more about what Charlie's done, it's all on your website, charlieengle.com. So thanks again. I'm truly grateful you spent the hour with us.
It was really my pleasure. And Denise and Bond, it was great. And anything I can ever do, please just ask. And if anyone sees this and they want to reach out to me personally to discuss any of the things I've talked about, whether it's addiction or running or anything else, I'm the easiest person there is to find. All the contact info on my website is mine. So feel free to reach out, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. I've got a project in Atlanta that I'm gonna tease you now. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. It's a youth sports project, actually. So as soon as things kind of get back online, I'm going to be bugging you about this, and we're gonna work on something together soon.
I'm in. I don't even know what it is, but I'm in. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
All right, take care.